This is something that I call service mapping. Where you look at any process. Now again, as you know your processes better than I do, but this could be the sales process. It could be a meeting that you have with a dealer or a distributor, or a training session, a product training session that you might have. It could be introducing a new product. It could even be handling some of those challenging situations, like a delivery issue or a billing dispute. Which that's a reality. It happens in all of our companies. But any process that's important to your relationship with the customer. Now again, this is a thought process, but the way this will work going forward is you come together as a function, as a team, and you say, okay, let's map whatever process we want to get better at, let's map it out. Usually I just have a flip chart or a whiteboard, and you map it out. So obviously each box represents a step. But here's the key. Here's the key. Each step is through the lens of your customer. Not through your operational lens. It's through the lens of the customer. So I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Let's just say, and I'm making this example up, but let's say one of your customers has a product question. And I want to take it a step further in terms of the relationship. It's a question that you're going to have to get back with that customer. It's always great when we can do a one-call resolution, but let's take it up and say, no, this is one you're going to have to do some research and get back with that customer. So we say, well, we want you, now I hope you would agree, this is a moment of truth, right? This is a moment of truth. So we come together as a team, somebody leading the discussion, it could be anybody on the team leading the discussion, that's a flip chart. We just start brainstorming. So what happens first? So somebody in the group says, well, the first thing is they place the call to Septidon. So we put that down on the service map. Then somebody says, now they navigate to the proper person, whoever it is they need to be talking to, but they get to whoever it is they need to talk to. So we put that down on the service map. Then somebody says, now they provide their customer information, who they are, and so forth. So all we're doing right now is we're just brainstorming. How does this thing flow? But from the customer's perspective. And you might have to move some things around. That's okay. You want to get this right. Then somebody says, now the customer explains the question or the issue. And then somebody on the team says, now we research the answer. Because remember, as I said, this is one that's going to require some research. So let's stop the action now. And this is very important in certainly this tool, but just in the mindset that we're talking about. Take a look at the first 4 boxes that are up there, the first 4. Those are through the lens of the customer, right? Those first 4 are. But that 5th box, that's through your lens. That's through the Septidon lens. Let's say you were in a meeting like this and somebody said, all right, now we research the answer. The question to ask, and please ask the question. While we're researching the answer, what's the customer doing? And in this case, what's the answer to that question? They're waiting, right? That's what needs to go in the box. The customer waits while we research the answer. Now, I understand that looks like a very subtle, a very picky difference. I believe it's all the difference in the world. Because you're looking at a critical moment, right, in an important process, and as a team, you're turning that lens around. I think it's all the difference in the world. And then, obviously, you would continue it on. So the first step, let's identify a process we want to get better at. Second step, we come together as a team, we map it out through the lens of the customer. And then the third step, and here is where the magic of this tool really kicks in. If you go ahead and turn to page number 3 of the handout. So we've got our service map now. We've got the service map. For each step that you just identified, you now ask 2 very important questions. What would mediocre service look like, or average service look like at each step? And what would excellent service look like at each step? And here's the reason I suggest that you do it exactly that way. We're meeting as a team. Pull out one of the steps and we say, okay, what would mediocre service look like at this step? I promise you, as good as I know you are, there will be some steps when we start saying, okay, this is what mediocre or average service would look like. Somebody on the team is going to say, you know what? That kind of sounds like what's happening at that step right now. Which sounds negative, but it's not. Because first of all, I am not talking about poor service. Right? So if you say, okay, what would mediocre or average service look like at this step? And somebody on the team says, well, if we punch the customer. No, see, that's bad. That's bad. That's not mediocre. All right? Mediocre is sort of that, remember earlier we were talking about that task-oriented service? That's what we're talking about. Sometimes that is what's happening. I do this with a lot of companies that I consult with, help them service map their processes. Invariably, this is what we find, and folks, you're going to find it. I promise you, you're going to find the same thing. There'll be some steps, you're providing stellar service. Best in class service. This forces you to look at every step. And no matter how good you are, there are always opportunities. And it provides you, as Septidon, a wonderful opportunity to say, well, if that's what's happening at this step, and we're saying it's average or mediocre, then what would excellent service look like? And that's where the ideas really come out. Now, I am not naive. I know we can't implement every idea, right, that might be generated. But I promise you, just across the company, by having this dialogue, some of the ideas that come out, you'll be thinking, why didn't we ever think of this before? Like, I do a lot of work with the banking industry. The banking industry is one of the industries that I spend a lot of time with. Now, in the U.S., most banks have drive-through tellers. I know that's not worldwide, but most banks have a drive-through teller. There has to be a bank. There has got to be a bank that was the first one to say, if a customer comes through the drive-through teller and they have a dog in the car, we ought to put a dog biscuit in the container when we send it out to them. Does anybody bank at a bank that does the dog biscuit thing? Okay, I just love that. Now, when I work with a bank and somebody says, oh, that's a great idea, we should do that, we should do that, I always tell them, please coach your employees to make sure there is a dog in the car. You know what people say, this is my son. He's not a handsome boy. Send out the lollipop. But those are the kinds of ideas. Cost virtually nothing, right? Cost virtually nothing. Takes no more time, because the teller was already sending the container out, right? Doesn't take any more time. But just a smile on your face is what I mentioned. It changes the whole dynamic. You can apply this to any process. Now, again, I want to stress, you don't have to wait for anybody else to do anything. You can apply, you can think about the processes that you do right now, and you can do exactly the same thing. But this will be a key tool going forward in the customer centricity effort. And I want to show you how powerful this can be. Because I just hope that it becomes embedded in the culture. Back in the early 1990s, and this is when I was still with Disney, we wanted to raise the bar of service. And we were already, it's kind of like Septidon. We had a great market share. We were already doing well. And when you're doing well, that's the best time to say, how do we get better? And we look at hundreds of processes. Where can we improve? And one that we saw as an area of opportunity was this one right here. Was getting the guests from the park back to their hotel at the end of the evening. Because, contrary to popular belief, the end of the day at Disney is not a happy time. And if you've ever been there with your families, you know what I'm talking about. You're there all day long. You're hot. You're tired. You have no money left. The kids are hanging off of you. And at 10 p.m., the fireworks go off. And when the fireworks are over, the magic is done. Because it's this mass exodus of humanity. And you watch these poor folks as they're dragging out of the park. And this is the end of the day at what is supposed to be the happiest place on earth. So we said this is an opportunity. Now, this is just one example. But we pulled together cast members that, just like I'm suggesting to you, we pulled together cast members that are involved in this process, and we mapped it out. Now, just like anything you would map out within Septidon, there are internal things going on that make all of that happen. But through your lens as a guest, that's how you get better. So what would mediocre service look like? What would excellent service look like? And they came up with wonderful things, like the bus drivers. Now, the bus drivers, they will hold Disney trivia contests on the bus ride back. They'll get the kids on the bus singing Disney songs, as long as it's not a small world. You want to get some of that. But remember, and again, this is important, bus drivers were already driving the buses, right? So there's no added cost, is there? There's no added cost, there's no added time. They were already driving the buses. It was just taking a step back, looking at a process we had been doing since 1971, and turning that lens around. And from my perspective, most importantly, getting the people involved that do the job. But the one that shows me the power of an idea, because once in a while, and this is going to happen here, but it's going to happen within Septidon, Once in a while, an idea comes along that just has a wonderful effect on the customer experience. And for me, it's that last step, entering the room. In my opinion, the hardest job at Disney World, or any of the Disney parks, is being a housekeeper in the hotels. You know, a maid in the hotels. I'll tell you right now, folks, cleaning up after people on vacation, that is a hard job. And if you've ever visited Disney World with small children, remember how your kids collected the stuffed Disney characters? You know, the stuffed Mickeys and Plutos and so forth. Here's what happens. Most people stay at Disney World for 4 nights and 5 days. That's a typical entry stay. So here's what happens. You're in the park. Your kids buy some of the stuffed characters. That night, they put them in your room. The next day, you're back in the park, your kids buy more of the stuffed characters. That night, they put them in your room. And over the course of your vacation, they accumulate because the kids keep buying them. What the housekeepers would do while you're off in the park playing, they would come into your room, move the characters off to the side, clean up, and then off they would go. Because they had a lot of rooms to clean. One evening, one housekeeper, her name was Helen, she decided that she was going to do something different. She was doing a nighttime turn-down service in one of the hotels. And she went into this one family's room. Again, they were out having dinner. And she did all of the things that she was supposed to do. She cleaned up the room. She turned down the bed. But then she took the stuffed Disney characters, put them up on the children's beds, up on the pillow, and then she tucked them in. Put the covers right up to the next tuck. And then she left a little note saying, I know you had a busy day. The characters told me they were tired. So I tucked them in for you. Signed her name Helen on the note and left it on the bed. Probably took her, 20 seconds maximum to do that. But I want you to imagine that family coming back to that room. Because remember the family we're talking about. And if you've been there, you know, as that family's walking toward that hotel room door, you know the kids are fighting with each other. Right? If you've been there, you know the parents are fighting with each other. That's the magical Disney moment that's happening here. And then they open up the door, and this is what they see. And it's Disney again. It's magic again, because one housekeeper who has a hard job and a lot of rooms to clean said, I'm going to take a moment, and I'm going to create some magic. But here's the business question. How do we leverage something like that? You know, so many times I'll work with a company, and as I meet employees across the organization, I find these fabulous behaviors that if they could just capture the best of those and build them into the process, the outcome would be amazing. That's what service mapping does. Because remember how I told you we pulled together cast members to talk about this? Well, in one of those meetings, Helen, that housekeeper, was there. So when we were going around the room, said, what are some things you could do? What are some ideas you have? What are some things you've heard about? And it came to Helen, and she said, well, I don't know if it means anything to anybody, but what I do is I tuck into Disney characters. Imagine saying that for all your coworkers. Everybody thought this was the greatest idea, and it took off. Housekeepers were talking about it, managers were talking about it. It's become kind of legendary there now. It's even become something of a competition for the housekeepers on different things that they can do. Like some of them, they'll line the characters up in front of the television set in your room and turn it on. So you walk in. Just back away, kids. Just back away. Anybody remember the old Chucky movies? Remember Chucky, that little doll? Yeah, that would freak me out. But all because a housekeeper, who again has a hard job, said, I'm going to create some magic. But more importantly, how do we leverage that? That's what service mapping does. So again, going forward, this will be a big part of customer centricity. But I want to stress again, it's also a thought process that you can begin applying immediately. Am I seeing the experience through the lens of the customer? Now, I will admit that now that I don't work for Disney anymore, right, I am waiting for some disgruntled, frustrated housekeeper, who's getting ready to quit, to put Goofy passed out in front of the minibar in her room. The little empty booze bum all around him, the booze bottles. Cigarette butts. It would be worth it. It really would be worth it. I mean, now.